Welcome to Werezilla's Retrospective. I'm your host, Werezilla. The Transformers are back, and this time they're on the run, which is a great metaphor for the film franchise at this point. There's no denying that the live-action Transformers films make money, meaning they are very much a success for Hasbro. Of course, if you were to ask a certain type of longtime Transformers fan, particularly those who grew up watching the original series back in the 80s, the films are a total failure that make the entire franchise look like a laughingstock. Sure, you don't need to be an existing Transformers fan to think that this is dumb.
I am directly below. Enemy scrotum.
But the average moviegoer and even professional reviewers aren't going to be as vocal or talk on as many internet forums as a passionate fan of the franchise. Pardon my armchair psychology for a moment. Maybe you've heard this term before, G1er. In other words, it's the kind of fan who thinks the original series is the best, while all future series are a mockery of something they hold precious. Now, I've had the opportunity to talk about a lot of different Transformers shows and movies over the years, and unfortunately, I can't really agree with the G1er mindset. Not only have I seen quality material from later series, but I've also seen that even the worst parts of Transformers had at least a few good things going for it. G1ers operate under the idea that this nuance doesn't exist. What did any of that have to do with my metaphor regarding Transformers being on the run? It's simple. They're on the run from the Hasbro executives that want to make more movies out of them, while also being on the run from the G1ers who want to use them as a punching bag. Given how previous movies turned out, you might think it's a stretch to assume director Michael Bay even cares what G1ers think. In fact, he might have more of an interest in appealing to those who grew up with watching more contemporary seasons like Transformers Animated and Prime. The best way I can explain Age of Extinction is that it has the strengths of the first Bayformers, the dumb stuff of Revenge of the Fallen, and the mixing and mashing of ideas from Dark of the Moon. Does that make any sense? Don't worry, it will. Is it because they're trying to make a better movie this time around, or is it to stem the tide of objections from G1ers? I honestly think that depends upon what part of the movie we're talking about. Let us begin.
Part 4, Bayformers, Age of Marky Mark.
That.
One of the dumber aspects of Revenge of the Fallen was revealing the city battle in the first film was covered up by the government. You'd think that would be impossible to hide the giant transforming robots' existence from the public. Well, this movie basically throws that out the window as the Decepticons' attack on Chicago in Dark of the Moon is not covered up here in Age of Extinction. The existence of the Cybertronian race is public knowledge now, and humanity has completely turned on them. The Autobots alliance with the US military is disbanded, and in its place is the CIA Black Ops unit Cemetery Wind, who is actively hunting Autobot and Decepticon alike. And who should be supporting Cemetery Wind but none other than Lockdown? He's a great example of Transformers taking good ideas from one series and putting them in another. A character from Transformers Animated, originally created because they didn't have the rights to use the Marvel character Death's Head, Lockdown quickly became a popular character in his own right. A poncho-wearing, hook-handed, immoral bounty hunter who will do any job for the right price. And now, a mere 6 years after his creation, he's one of the main villains of this movie. He doesn't have his animated counterparts have it up upgrading himself with body parts of his victims, but he does have the ability to transform his face into a gun. A very unique bit of customization. Interestingly, Lockdown allows the movie to have a subtle story beat. Yeah, I know, subtlety in a Bayformers movie, hard to imagine. Cemetery Wind's willingness to work with Lockdown despite indiscriminately hunting Cybertronians is meant to be the audience's first clue that their actions aren't for the benefit of mankind, but instead the personal benefit of their director, Harold Attinger. As far as human villains are concerned, Attinger is one of the more threatening ones. He's cold and uncaring about the Autobots and Decepticons' conflict, and takes advantage of the tensions between them and humanity in order to gain political power. In addition to Cemetery Wind, he also has a company called KSI using reverse-engineered transformer bodies to create his own man-made drones. You know humanity's well-being isn't Attinger's priority, given his willingness to kill the human protagonists of this movie.
What's the other version of this conversation? Will you send in the hired help to murder my little girl? Or are you gonna man up and do it yourself?
What's your preference?
Gone is Shia LaBeouf as Sam Witwicky, tired of embarrassing himself after 3 films, and in his place is Mark Wahlberg as the down-on-his-luck inventor, Cade Jaeger. Yeah, maybe he should have been a mechanic or something, because I don't think of an inventor when I see this character. The thing that kickstarts the plot is him discovering and repairing Optimus Prime. A mechanic arguably makes more sense. Of course, with how fit Wahlberg is, there is one thing I can see him as: an action movie star. Frankly, his fight with one of Cemetery Wind's agents feels right out of a summer blockbuster. I mean, this is a summer blockbuster, but I mean an action movie that has nothing to do with Transformers, making Wahlberg a weird case of being well-cast and miscast at the same time. He's a father trying to make a better life for his teenage daughter, Tessa, and while the film initially tries to pass him off as being overprotective, it turns out he's fully justified in worrying about her safety when he meets her boyfriend, Shane.
How old are you? 20.
Okay, I think we're crossing a few lines here, don't you think? I know hormonal teenagers are the target audience for these films, so obviously they're not going to question this, but I would assume the adult filmmakers would know better.
It's bad enough they justify this by having the Jaeger family live in Texas, where the age of consent is 17, but the resulting subplot is disgustingly handled as well. You'd think Shane would be trying to prove himself to Cade that Tessa is safe to be around him, but his interactions with Cade basically amount to, I'm dating your daughter and you're just gonna have to learn to accept it. And as for Tessa, she's a living MacGuffin, here to motivate Cade to keep her safe. She's a helpless victim most of the time, threatened by Cemetery Wind agents and unknowingly captured by Lockdown. Really, her only moment to shine is one she has to share with her father and Shane. I'll talk about this moment when I discuss the ending, but it's telling that Michaela was able to hold her own against smaller Decepticons, had a cool team-up with Bumblebee in the first movie, and rescues Sam from Alice in the second, which makes Tessa seem like a downgrade in comparison.
What was it I said before about Megan Fox not getting along with Michael Bay, which contributed to why she left after the second movie? Is this the end result of this? A female character who is not only useless, but one who is getting taken advantage of by an older man?
Interestingly, the human character who goes through the most amount of growth in this movie isn't one of our leads. It's the guy in charge of KSI, Joshua Joyce. He's an eccentric scientist who treats the reverse-engineered technology acquired from the Cybertronians like a kid in the candy store. Or maybe toy store would be a better metaphor. His name for the metal Cybertronians is made from is an intentionally cheesy one, transformium. As goofy as that sounds, it leads to his change of heart when he learns it can destroy organic life. It killed the dinosaurs in the film's opening, it has the ability to transform into a variety of things, including other Hasbro products, and is what KSI created their man-made transforming drones from. One of them is patterned off of Bumblebee, who doesn't appreciate KSI making a drone in his likeness.
I hate cheap knockoffs.
As you might expect, among the Transformer bodies used to create them included Megatrons, whose head is surprisingly intact given what happened in the last movie. Joyce wants to create his own clone of Optimus akin to a subplot from Transformers Prime, though it plays out more like Megatron's plan to rebuild himself from Transformers Animated, as his consciousness apparently survived, transferring into the new clone body and allowing him to take control of the drones, which leads to the film's climax where he plans to drop a transformium bomb into the city of Hong Kong in order to simultaneously kill a lot of people while also creating a new Decepticon army. I don't buy Cade as an inventor, but he uses this role to appeal to Joyce's better nature, to help him see Attinger as abusing Transformium for his own gain. I thought I was going to be annoyed by this character when he first appeared on screen, and yet by the time it was over, I thought he was one of the more enjoyable aspects.
I modeled Galvatron after Optimus Prime. Why does he keep looking like Megatron?
Algorithms! Math! Why can't we make what we want to make the way we want to make it?
Funny enough, if there's anyone who can relate to Joyce in this scene, it's Megatron.
I've got morons on my team.
You'll notice Joyce called the clone body Galvatron, and I suppose this is different enough of an appearance to justify the name change. It's more than a simple color scheme difference, which is a step up from the Unicron trilogy, and perhaps most notably, his cartoon voice actor Frank Welker returns to reprise the role.
You have no soul. That is why I have
His performance is a lot closer to his Megatron voice from Transformers Prime, as opposed to his Galvatron voice from the original series. Is that good? Is that bad? We can probably guess what a G1er might say, but this version of the character isn't supposed to be batshit crazy, so the more sinister voice of the Prime iteration makes more sense. I know I scoffed at Welker not being cast as Megatron in the first film because Michael Bay thought that voice was too cartoony, but this time around I get the logic behind sticking with the Prime Megatron voice instead of G1 Galvatron.
We shall meet again, Prime, for I am reborn.
But what would this movie be without the Autobots? Most of the superfluous characters introduced in the second and third movies are either MIA or casualties of Cemetery Wind, leaving the poster boys for this series Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, along with 3 new characters. Crosshairs, played by John DiMaggio, who butts heads with Bumblebee when he's first introduced, before getting to show off his aerial combat skills. Drift, who's played by Ken Watanabe, and I'm a little surprised to see Drift in the films, given he was a relatively unpopular character when he was first introduced into the IDW comics. But nothing stays the same forever in this franchise, I guess. And then there's Hound, played by John Goodman. Hound is what you might call an amalgam character, combining elements from multiple Transformers to make a whole new one for the film. He's a green military vehicle named Hound, like the G1 character, while his rotund appearance is more akin to Bulkhead, and his personality is a gruff veteran commando similar to Kup. Both characters even have a cigar. The best way to enjoy this version of the Hound is to ignore the G1ers and put the cartoon character out of your mind, because he really isn't supposed to be the same character.
Sure is pretty out here, Spike.
You're just too disturbing to live. You're dead.
It's not Generation 1 accurate, but this Hound is entertaining in his own way. Goodman's noticeably having a lot of fun playing this character. The movie's handling of the Autobots largely reminds me of the first film. The lion's share of plot relevancy goes to Optimus and Bumblebee, but the 3 other Autobots get a decent amount of characterization sprinkled throughout the film, giving them some fun banter and multiple chances to partake in some large-scale action sequences. Maybe a little too much, but we'll get to that. Furthermore, KSI drones and Lockdown's generic mercenaries are literally just goons instead of characters with names, meaning the villains don't have the lack of characterization problem the last few movies had. And with all of the other characters touched on, it's finally time for me to address Optimus Prime. I felt it was important for me to address everyone else first, especially Attinger, because it provides context for Optimus's arc in this movie. His hope at the conclusion of the first movie was that Earth would become a home for the Autobots, promising to protect humanity from the Decepticons. He put his trust in our species. But after Sentinel Prime's actions in the last film, Cemetery Winds went ahead and killed many of his comrades. Seriously, Ratchet isn't fighting back in this scene. Given this is Optimus Prime, someone who considers every Autobot character his friend, he doesn't take this well. In a lot of ways, Attinger was an important antagonist to have at this point because he's capable of driving Optimus past his breaking points.
But when I find out who's behind this, he's going to die.
Now, given my criticisms of how he handled Megatron and Sentinel Prime in the last movie, you may be surprised to hear that I'm actually okay with this plot point. It wasn't a character arc that led Optimus to killing the pair in Dark of the Moon's finale. It was more like him adhering to action movie cliches. But things are not the same in Age of Extinction. In this movie, the whole point of Optimus's character is that he's been changed by his experience and he has had enough. Humanity is not the innocent life form he wanted to protect in the first film. They've become a mostly hostile alien species. At the very least, the Jaeger family helping Optimus fight Lockdown in the film's climax is a nice way of reaffirming to Optimus that he has at least some human allies. Tessa and Shane's relationship makes my stomach turn, but they end up helping Optimus in the final battle, so good thing they were there for that scene at least. Much like how Attinger was able to bring the Autobots to the brink with Lockdown's aid, Optimus is able to take them both down with human friends of his own.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Hopefully it'll work.
I mean, at the very least, it's more poetic than Drift's haiku.
Loyalty's but a flower in the winds of fear and temptation.
Cut the crap before I drop a grenade down your throat.
And as far as Optimus's promise about what he would do to the person responsible for hunting the Autobots, this is yet another point where I'm going to have to be controversial and disagree not only with the G1ers, but most Transformers fans. Think back to Lord Chumley from the original series episode Prime Target. He's a much sillier villain than Attinger, but he still manages to push Optimus's buttons in ways Megatron rarely is able to do in the original series by literally hunting the Autobots like animals. A human villain being able to test Optimus's ideals is consistent not only with the movie character, but the original as well. He has dialogue in this film that would fit in just fine with the original episode.
They're not your property. They were my friends.
You'll notice there's at least 3 primary villains with their own agendas: Lockdown, Attinger, and Galvatron, meaning there are multiple plot threads to follow, leading to a common criticism of this movie: its length. Age of Extinction is the longest Bayformers movie with a lot of plots running at once. Cemetery Wind hunting the Autobots, the Jaeger family drama, Optimus being bitter and less idealistic, Megatron becoming Galvatron, Joyce's character arc, it's very cluttered. Lip service is paid to Bumblebee trying to lead the Autobots in Optimus's absence, with Crosshairs and Drift not taking him very seriously, but it's a very brief moment that doesn't amount to much. I said the climax involved the KSI drones led by Galvatron attacking Hong Kong, but the final battle was between Optimus and Lockdown. I didn't even address how Lockdown has another client. Besides working with Cemetery Wind, he's also been hired to hunt Optimus Prime in particular by aliens calling themselves the Creators. Because this movie has a lot of plots to tell, this leads to Optimus being captured and then rescued over the course of 15 minutes. The Creators themselves feel like an underdeveloped idea as they are shown killing the dinosaurs with transformium in the opening, but we don't get a full body shot of what they look like and are absent from the plot outside of being Lockdown's employers. This leads to some cool lines from Lockdown, to be sure.
You all think you're the center of the universe. You have no idea.
And no, this film makes no attempt to reconcile the Allspark from the previous films with the Creators from this movie. Am I supposed to extrapolate that the Allspark was one of their transformium seeds that they used to create Cybertron? All we can do is speculate because the film itself doesn't have enough time to explain it with all the other stories going on here.
Then there's the Dinobots. Oh boy, the Dinobots. If you were paying attention to the marketing of this movie, you probably noticed that they were all over the place. This is called Age of Extinction, after all. So naturally, they only appear towards the end.
I suspect comic book writer Simon Furman was just as disappointed as many others in the audience with the Dinobots. At some point in the past, they were captured by Lockdown and held prisoner on his ship. The one who transforms into a T-Rex challenges Optimus for dominance, suggesting this is the film version of Grimlock, and that's what's written on the toy's box. But it would have been nice if he actually said so. Would have been nice if all of the Dinobots had dialogue, but not one of them speaks in this movie. Instead, they are largely here to wipe out the KSI drones. Optimus riding on Grimlock's back is pretty cool, but it's largely to give us some epic trailer shots rather than contributing much to the movie. Because once all is said and done, the Dinobots just exit stage left. Speaking of inevitable topics, now's the traditional Bayformers goofs. Like the chase scene between the Jaegers and Cemetery Wind, having wildly changing lighting conditions, making the passage of time during the chase hard to keep track of. Also, the condition Megatron's head is in, looking good considering he took an axe to the face and had his whole spinal cord pulled out. There's also Cade's solo battle with one of Cemetery Wind's agents, where he jabs his thumb into the guy's eye. Holy shit, wait, never mind. Both his eyes are fine. I have no explanation for this. As far as other action scenes in this movie, they are a slight improvement over the first film, as they are no longer zoomed in on the robots' chests whenever they are fighting. Now, however, we have a lot more slow motion shots. So much slow motion that I started to wonder if Michael Bay is taking the piss. One thing I know for absolute certain is that the Willis Tower is not located in Hong Kong. People have criticized the plot moving from Chicago in the middle of the movie to Hong Kong in the climax, seeing it as purely a means of pandering to the Chinese audience. The filmmakers seem to have a hard time keeping track of where we are, given we have cars in Chicago driving on the right side and cars in Hong Kong driving on the left. Hollywood trying to appeal to an international audience is a whole can of worms in and of itself, so maybe I should save that topic for another day. But if there's one thing that caught my attention about the Hong Kong battle, it's how the movie goes overboard with the product placement. I can't even think of a funny joke or Man of Steel reference because it feels even more excessive than that movie. And then there's the implementation of Transformium as a plot element. Galvatron and his KSI drones don't have traditional transformations, disassembling into metal particles and then reassembling themselves. Let's not kid ourselves here, the toys don't do this. My theory is that this way of transforming is easier for the animators than the genuine Cybertronians with their transformations involving physically moving parts around. If there's any truth to this theory, then I sympathize with the animators, at least to a certain extent because the effects still look less convincing. Though in terms of visual storytelling, this is a unique way of differentiating the real Transformers from KSI's man-made drones. But you want to know what else it is by default? False advertising.
I think it goes without saying that if this was a season of a television series, then all of these ideas could have been properly fleshed out, instead of the film's current tactic of throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks.
So what's the too long, didn't read version of this review? I guess I can say I liked it a little bit more than the previous movies. You can call that a low bar to reach. Indeed, when I decided to review the live-action movies, I wondered if I was punching down. While there's still a bunch of flawed aspects of this movie, or in the case of adults dating teenagers, deplorable things, I ended up liking this film more than I thought I would. So far, I've liked all of the live-action movies more than I expected. Except for Revenge of the Fallen, but we already covered that. I am hopefully optimistic for the fifth film, The Last Night. I have not heard good things, but the same is also true about this movie.
However, before we get to The Last Night, my next review will be revisiting something I've talked about all the way back in my first year of reviewing things on my channel. Perhaps one of my most controversial videos, when I talked about the first King Kong remake from 1976. Despite the reaction I got last time, I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are as well.
Oh hey, and check this out. While I was working on this review, Hasbro revealed they're selling this. How topical, a self-transforming Grimlock toy. Does this look like something any of you might want? Are you kidding me with that price? Are you mad?